how we got involved in autopsies is that the two redheaded boys were released by Hamas, deceased, and mutilated, and their mother. And in a nationwide, not America, but in a nationwide uh, televised event, all day long practically, all the TV stations in Israel were glued to Hamas releasing the, the coffins in a celebratory party atmosphere attended by a huge crowd in Gaza. Parenthetically, all very well fed. Nobody emaciated in that crowd. Some of them strong enough to carry coffins as pallbearers. And the bodies, the coffins were placed into Red Cross vehicles. And Israeli television. I haven't seen anything like that in America since I was 10 years old. The weekend of John Kennedy's assassination. I remember as a boy, Saturday night and Sunday, we were glued to the television. I remember twice in my life that come to mind when all of America's TV stations in the years before cable, which just made that impossible because there are too many other TV stations breaking away for commerce, so the big stations don't want to give that up. But I remember twice. I remember November 22nd, he was murdered, and Friday the 23rd, no, that was Friday, and then Saturday the 23rd, Sunday the 24th, watching the TV and watching like I was a boy, 10 years old. Perhaps some of you also were boys or girls around that age, remember seeing Lee Harvey Oswald shot in front of our very eyes. I was trying to process it. I wasn't like traumatized. I was just trying to process it. As a 10-year-old, I understood that. I don't know if I was like every 10-year-old or maybe I was, a little more knowledgeable. But I understood this the guy that they say killed Kennedy, murdered Kennedy. And I understand somebody just shot him in front of my eyes. And as I say, I wasn't traumatized. I just remember as a kid, I was trying to process it like I was pretty smart, but I'd never seen that before. And he's in federal custody. So I remember that. And I remember July 1969, how the whole nation sat there watching the moon landing. So that's what Israel had. Israel has that a lot, by the way. First of all, they don't have as much entertainment television. They have cable and they have their entertainment television. Some pretty good stuff. Some of the stuff you've seen here in America, Srugim and Fauda and Shababniks and Shtisel, but the whole country was just glued to the TV, watching the coffins, watching the celebration over their deaths, watching them transferred into the Red Cross cars, and just watching from overhead drone cameras or whatever, just watching for an hour as the motorcade of 8-9 cars just went through Gaza into Israel and then kept going north and north and north and north. I thought it was going to stop, somewhere in the Negev, somewhere south in Israel, near where the kibbutzim had been attacked. It just kept going. And as I'm watching on Israeli TV, because you can't get that in America, there's a service you can get that you actually get Israeli TV on your screen. You actually get not the best of Israeli TV, not hot. You get Israeli TV. You're watching Israeli TV. So I had that particular service, and I'm watching. I'm shifting between the stations, among the stations, and it just keeps going. They keep going, and I'm listening. And they explain they're going to the National Autopsy Center. I've never heard of that in America. We probably do have that. Israel also is a smaller country. So if you have a country of 300 million, America, maybe you don't have one autopsy center. And maybe a country of Israel, which is the population of New York. So maybe you do have like that guy Bader, or whatever his name was, that Michael Baden or something, the chief autopsy guy, coroner in New York, who would always be doing all those very famous, I was going to say coronations, all those famous autopsies of the coroner, in the same way. But so that got me interested. I'm teaching a course on ethics and values of Jews at times of war, and it did not occur to me that autopsies is an important. You have people dying. Their soldiers are dying. People are dying, and halacha is very different when it comes to autopsies than by the Goyim. And I thought this should be a very important part of our course. So it's 3 sessions, I think. Today's the third and final. And we get into a little more of the nitty gritty. So first, we have a very interesting 2-part issue. We've learned a Jew has to be buried right away. And I even mentioned Robert Klein's grandfather, who was afraid to fall asleep when he was watching TV in the living room because since Jews have to be buried right away, he was afraid in his 80s, the moment he closed his eyes and didn't move for 2 minutes, the family would bury him. And it's a serious halakha, and God forbid if you've ever been in that situation in your family, God, I hope never, but everybody gets to work right away. Not only out of respect, but everybody assumes it's got to be right away, and then the questions arise. Well, this relative, my mother, Zichron Livracha, passed away. I was in Los Angeles, here in Irvine, so I've got to stop everything, turn off the TV. Ellen Zichron Livracha and I were watching something and turned it off right away. Start packing. So now you got to get a plane right away, and you got to, and we couldn't get in on Sunday. We still had to get certain things done. And so fastest we can get there was Monday. So mom passed away on Shabbos, and I found out Motzei Shabbos, and then we couldn't get there. And remember, New York's 3 hours later. So even if we could get there at 6 p.m. on Sunday, which we did, we got there like 6 or 7 p.m. next day. But it was too late for the burial, and so the burial was on Monday. So are you allowed to delay it for another day when you always hear that it's got to be right away? I mean, is it right away? How does the rule go? And we've been learning that. We've learned halachically that it may be delayed slightly out of honor on 2 levels. Honor for the deceased, excuse me, and honor for the living. Honor for the deceased, that famous people or people the deceased would want to be there, and honor for the living psychologically. We learned this last class and before, that when my daddy died, 1967, I was 14. I just gave away how young I was. Mom is mom, but my father is daddy, because we were kids. So when daddy died, it meant a tremendous amount to me as a 14-year-old that there were people, that the place was packed. It was something the Rabbi Applebaum talked about at the sermon, at the eulogy, and it was something that I continued to mention in later years. That when my father passed away, the Kirschenbaum Funeral Home in Brooklyn, there were hundreds of people. He had touched lives. So more than honoring him, it honored my mother, it honored us kids. And it was a big thing for us. By contrast, I think back to Death of a Salesman, the 1950s play by Arthur Miller, where Willie Loman always talked about how loved he was as a salesman in New England. They lived in New York, and he was constantly on the road in New England selling whatever. And he comforted himself that that the day he is buried, there'll be salespeople from all over New England that he's known and loved and tellingly at the end of the play, when the mother and the two sons get together, they're the only ones at the cemetery. And they have their conversation about, well, I don't want to, it's a worthwhile play. You should see at least once in your lifetime. Very, very meaningful, moving. Anyway, so my daddy's funeral and Willie Loman's funeral. Two common men, not famous, but the difference is powerful. So halakha says you may delay the burial a little so people can get there. So Dove, the son, can get to mom's funeral from Irvine to the East Coast. But I can't say mom passed away at a very inconvenient week. That week I've got just a whole bunch of stuff going on. We'll have to postpone it. No, you don't do that. You'll get the next plane you can get, and blah, 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 but you don't say, look, I've got trial this week if I was a lawyer, or you just contact them. Trial's going to have to be postponed if the judge says no. Tough luck. And the judge will accept it. Because if you're in a big firm, you might think, well, they have 150 lawyers. If they're going to trial on Monday, they could have some other, you can't just have some other lawyer go to trial on Monday after you've been handling a year or 5 years of pretrial motions and evidence discovery, whatever. But you have to go. You have to go to the funeral. You don't wait a week. So we've learned all that. And then we concluded, among other things last time, and so as we were balancing what we're learning halacha with what was going on in the real world, it emerged from that autopsy. Rambam never expected that. It's interesting. A Jew thinks like a Jew. What are they going to do? What are you going to find out in the autopsy? Was it a murder? Who would imagine that they're going to send a fake body, the wrong body? Who would imagine such a thing? It could be with Jews, with the worst crooks. It could be. Could be. It really wouldn't be. But that this would be, here we're learning the halacha, and son of a gun. Turns out they needed to do that autopsy because she wasn't the lady. That wasn't the mother. Those animals and vultures sent some other lady who God knows who she was. And so it became all the more so. And on top of that, Hamas was telling the world that Israel killed the redheaded boys with a bombing, that Israel, with a genocide, targeting innocent Gaza civilians, had bombed a residential home and they went, or maybe a school, that they were aiming for children. And these two redheaded children were victims of Israeli apartheid, occupation, imperialism, and most important, genocide and war crimes. And then they did an autopsy. Turns out they were choked to death. They saw evidence, unequivocal evidence, that the two baby boys, a 4-year-old and a 9-month-old, they were choked to death. The fingers, in the throats. And then the bodies were mauled, M-A-U-L. Reason I sometimes spell a word when I say it is with I recognize, joking aside, I have a Brooklyn accent. I just want to be sure like it comes out like I'm talking about mall and not a shopping mall. So anyway, they were mauled and they were disfigured after death, I hope, so that it would be believable perhaps in the minds of the Hamas animals and vultures that they had died in an air attack. They approximated what they imagined an air attack would leave a person looking like, so that it shouldn't be just plainly manifest. But they don't know coroner work, and it was just plainly manifest, the fingers digging in the throat and other things. So with that, again, I apologize for the occasional cough. I like to think of it as a reassurance that I'm still alive. The autopsy had more to offer than expected by halacha. It gave evidence to the world to the fair-minded world, because Israel filmed everything as they were doing it because they know what to expect from the even fair-minded world. So the evidence was shared immediately with the leading coroners of London and France, Paris, and all over the place, America. And it gave evidence that the kids were murdered, not the victims of an Israeli air attack, which, by the way, would not have meant anything particularly. Israel's fighting for its, if they had put these hostages in the heart of a dangerous area, they still would carry the blame, but all the more so. And then they find out they got the wrong woman. And so this really is stuff. When they start giving, you begin to realize people have to be autopsied. And once you start learning that, may as well learn about it in terms of all of us. And that's what we were doing. So now we're going to get into the last phase. So we learned something interesting. If a murderer, according to the Torah, a murderer commits murder, they get the death penalty. Not like today in the United States where they basically don't execute anybody. There are 2 or 3 states that still do. North Carolina just did it. North Carolina just did something very interesting. They did it by firing squad, like in the good old days. And it was like, I started reading about it. I don't normally read these particularly, but we're talking autopsies in my shiur. So I'm reading North Carolina to give a choice of 3, like a menu. They give a choice of the poison injection, but apparently there were 2 instances in the past year where the poison, with the injection of the toxins, took much longer than expected, and the witnesses reported that it didn't look good. Like the idea is supposed to be that it's the most humane one because it puts them to sleep and they don't know what hit them. But apparently it didn't put them to sleep and it wasn't pretty. Which, by the way, when you read, always in the middle of the article, not in the beginning of the article, not in the end of the article, only in the middle of the article, do they tell you what the guy did. So they make you feel bad in the beginning. They make sure you still feel bad in the end. And in the middle, when they tell you what he did to the mother and to the little girl in front of the mother, and the mother in front of the father, and you don't feel sorry for him anyway. It takes a lot for anybody to feel sorry at all. In fact, you feel bad, it only took that long. So the guy didn't want the injection because he'd been told what happened in the last 2. And he could have had, alternatively, I think, either the electric chair or the gas chamber. I think the electric chair. And he had heard, I mean, everybody in the Deep South, which is where the executions take place, everybody knows both Florida and Texas. In Florida, they actually call the electric chair in Florida Old Sparky. Of course, they've had several cases. I don't think they do it on purpose. It's just good old boys in charge in the South, and they didn't have, and it's like the Pacific Palisades electric lines. They sometimes they work and sometimes they don't quite. And so the guy said he wanted to just be shot, and it was an interesting article. I won't take your time on it. How they do it, of course, it's done in a way that the shooters, who are all volunteers, nevertheless shouldn't know that they're the one who killed him. So it's like they shoot from 8 or 10 different portals. They're in 8 different rooms. Each has a cutout square, and they shoot pointed the same direction, and they don't know which. And they're told that like 4 of the 8 guns have bullets and 4 don't. And anyway, there's not that many capital punishments in America. But halachically, we learned on the one hand, sure, all the time. And we learned on the other hand, never. Because if it happened once in 7 years, they said, this Betin is a murderous court. And if it was 7, some said even 70, it's a murderous court because of all the extra requirements that practically impossible, such as you need 2 witnesses who are kosher. That means they're Shomer Shabbos and they're over 13, and they're at the time of the murder, and they warn the guy right before he murders that if you commit the murder now, like imamish means that only one I can give as an example is like you go to OJ and he's just about to, he looks all around, make sure nobody sees that he's about to get Ron Goldman in the coal, and just as about to, 2 Yidden call out from behind, No, OJ, uh, there's a law in the Torah. It says, look, and they start to warn him, and he's got to acknowledge, and it's chayv misa, and will be the Adam at the Din. I mean, the whole it's preposterous, and that's why they never could kill anybody, even if they had witnesses that they'd lock them up, but they lemaisa in reality they never ended up killing. Okay, and now it turned out on top. If you know the guy's dying, if the guy's terminal, you can't kill him. What's that all about? So the halacha is, if you know, let's say, God forbid, person has COVID in 2020. I don't think you would call COVID in 2025 terminal right away. But in 2020, and let's say, God forbid, 2025, not responding to treatment, or probably in a situation like the Pope, I I think he came out. I think he's got a chance now. But they probably would have ruled that if somebody had shot him to death in the condition he was in a few weeks ago, they probably would have ruled he was bar lo kayama, that he was someone who wasn't going to make it anyway. I'm just mentioning him because he was a famous guy who, but the halakha is if a guy gets shot to death and they know he was going to be dying anyway, so then there's no death penalty, just imprisonment. So with that as background, from what we learned, let's go forward. Thanks for being here. As always, pass the word and pass the links. And I'm sure you've all subscribed by now. If you're catching us on YouTube, please subscribe. We're getting closer to 1,000 subscribers. And then YouTube will start giving us better exposure. Mishnah Torah, which is the name of this class in part. The Rambam compilation of halachot. So it's Mishnah Torah Hilchos Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the court of 70 judges, and penalties within their jurisdiction. Obviously, as the Supreme Court, death penalty is included. Mitzvah aseh likbor kol harigei beitim b'yom ha'harigah. It is a positive mitzvah in the Torah to bury all those who get executed by the Beit Din on the day of their execution. Not only should you not be hanging a body overnight, but the Torah says in Devarim, we've been in chapter 21 of Deuteronomy, 23. Let's take a look at it real quick. If any party is guilty of a capital offense and is put to death, vitalita oto alates, and then you hang him on a tree, you must not let the corpse remain on the tree overnight, but must bury it the same day. Lo talini v'lato ala etz, ki kavor tikperenu bayomahu. Rather, he must be buried same day. Ki kilalat elokim talui, because this is somehow a disgrace to God. V'lo tatami et admatcha asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha nachala. The land of Israel. So this applies not to a hanging in the United States or France or whatnot, but Eretz Israel must not have a body hanging overnight. The land is holy, and as long as it's not hanging overnight, it will not have been hanging a full 24 hours. What about Haman and the 10 brothers? We just read about it, where it was the Jews who wanted them to hang all day, and even another day, right? They killed Haman the first day, and then Achashverosh said, "What else would you like? Up to half the kingdom." And Esther said, "Please let us do another day in Shushan. We killed 500 in Shushan. Let us have another 300, and that we should be able to hang the bodies of the sons." So what about that? Well, that was Persia. It wasn't Eretz Israel. So Persia, may they experience many more hangings overnight. So anyway, here we go. So It says, Kitavor tikbarenu bayomahu. That's where we have our source that Jews have to be buried same day. From the story, the halacha of hanging a dead man, an executed capital crime dead man in Israel, we learn the halacha for all over the world that a Jew must be buried same day. Rambam tells us, like you and I alone would not be qualified to look at that pasuk, that verse, and say, a Jew has to be buried same day. Look what it says. We're not qualified to make such an interpretation. If it's talking about a capital crime in Israel, but this is Rambam. Rambam's qualified. First of all, he's qualified himself, and second of all, he pulls halacha from all over the Talmud, all over the Torah, and so that's why he did this. That's why he prepared Mishnah Torah, to pull all the halacha together and put it in one place. So if there's one place somewhere where it's at laws of war or wherever that the Gemara is talking about burying a capital crimes person, and maybe somewhere else it talks about in the Gemara that you should bury Jews in general. So he brings it all together and puts it into one category. V'lo harugei beitin bavad ela kol hamelin et meito over alav belo taseh. Not only those killed by Betin, by the court, ella, even one who is melin, from the word lina. Lina is to sleep overnight. One who makes to sleep overnight, one who makes the body essentially sleep overnight on the gallows. Over alav below taseh violates a lav, one of the 365 negative laws in the Torah. Torah is 365 negative laws and 248 positive laws. Helino lechvodo, lahavilo aron v'tachrichin. But if he kept the guy hanging overnight out of the honor to the deceased, wait a second, you're going to honor the son of Sam, David Berkowitz? I don't know. You're going to honor the guy who went around eating people? Was that Richard Speck, or he was the mass murderer of the nurses in Chicago, and the
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer. There we go. And it's like the Hebrew word dam is blood. Dahmer is even more blood. So thank you, Jeffrey Dahmer, or of course Ted Bundy. Once we start getting, and Charles Manson, once we start listing some of our American famous people. So anyway. Why is he entitled to covet? So the idea is he's not Jewish, not Dahmer, and not Manson, and not any of those guys. Hillside Strangler. A Jew, at some point in his life, maybe he had a bar mitzvah. Maybe he once put on tefillin. Maybe he once kept Shabbos or once said a bracha. Maybe he had a bris. Maybe he had his son have a bris. I mean, this was true when Bugsy Siegel was wiped out, smacked or whatever, whacked. When Bugsy Siegel was whacked by the mob in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, at his girlfriend's living room. So is a gangland wipeout. End of story? No, not end of story. They brought him back to the Lower East Side, where his traditional family, I don't know whether they're Orthodox or just traditional, but they went to shul, and his father went to shul every Shabbos, and they put up a plaque. I'm not making this up. They have a plaque for Bugsy Siegel in the shul, in the memorial thing. Let me just see. I'll take a quick second. I'm sorry, but now that I got started with this, let me just take a really quick second. And if I can't find it, I can't find it. Bugsy single, I don't know, Yorkside plaque. Memorial bronze. See. All right. See if any of this works out. I'm the worst typist. There we are. Wait, no. Bugsy. Where's Bugsy? There's Bugsy. There's Bugsy. There's Bugsy. See if we can get a bigger Bugsy. Let's get Bugsy. View the page, view the image. All right, just hold by this. So if you can see this, I think it's big enough. There's David Leaf. There's Max Siegel, Mordechai Dov, Beresh Halevi, and there's Benjamin Siegel. And that is not any Benjamin. That's Reb Bugsy. Beresh, so look at this. Mordechai Dov, Beresh. In other words, his grandfather was Beresh Siegel. His father was Mordechai Dov, and he was named for his grandfather. He was great. He was Beresh. He was named for his Zaidi. Beresh Barab Mordechai Dov, and he's the son of this Mordechai Dov. Halevi, he was a Levi, Nebuch, and he was rubbed out. Oh, look at this! Only 2 months after his father, he was rubbed out 2 months after his father. April, June, he was rubbed out. His father died right after Pesach, a week after Pesach, and he died 2 weeks before Shiva Tammuz, Nebuch. Okay. So look what you learn in this class, isn't it? It's important to know. So Jews, that's partly explaining why even you got to bury him, because he was once had a little neshama. So for his honor and to give him a proper aron, namely a proper closet, meaning a casket, for tachrichin, and he gets buried with proper shrouds. So ain't no overlap. Okay. So if that's why you had to postpone, he got shot to death in Beverly Hills, and it takes a few days to bring him over, and also, whatever. And by the way, he has to be buried with his blood. There's a big thing that let's see if I want to bring it in here. Maybe we'll just leave it alone. Okay, we're going to skip that. Okay. So an important thing to know is that he has to be buried with his blood. That God forbid, this is a famous thing in Israel, we're going to see example in a moment, that in Israel, God forbid someone dies in a car accident. There's this organization, ZAKA, ZAKA, Zion Aleph Kuf Aleph. And ZAKA are Orthodox volunteers who go to the scenes of death, accidents and worse, and they gather the deceased for proper gathering of the deceased, not to mention arranging a Chevra Kadisha, arranging the coffin and the shroud. Sometimes there's not a coffin in Israel, just the shrouds. And they gather all the blood at the accident scene of the car crash. If there's body parts, there's, God forbid, whatever would cause body parts. What happened after October 7, what happened on October 7? That's what really brought ZAKA to international attention, certainly among Zionists. As we started watching every news we could get, you saw these people were being highlighted, how they were racing down after the 1,200 were murdered, some very brutally, some worse than brutally. And they were picking up body parts, and then they had to figure out that there were Jews who were burned. There were Jews put in ovens, in their own ovens in the house. They chopped them up and they put them in their house ovens. There were babies, didn't have to be chopped up, little itsy bitsy babies. And they abused the corpses terribly. And ZAKA comes, it's worse than a car accident. So they get them, and then they come with sponges, and they sponge the blood on the street near the body, and they bury the person with the sponges. And if, God forbid, the guy lost, God forbid, an arm, they get the arm, and they bring the arm, and they wrap it up, and it's all buried in the casket. ZAKA, you know what went on with people who were burned or beheaded, and they behead the body, and even to call them bastards, there's no word in English language for them, what they are. And they took people, they cut them off limb by limb, like the worst mafia movies, and And then ZAKA is trying to find it's a room. There's 12 dead bodies, and the torsos are here, and there's 20 legs there, and there's 20 arms there, and there's heads over here. You get the idea, too much of the idea. And ZAKA is standing there. Who does this head go with? Which torso? Which arm? Which goes? And can we figure out which blood goes? I'm going to have an interview. It's tolerable. It's not so impossible to listen to that I can't share it with you, but that's the halacha. America, they don't do that. And America is a very ethical, good country. There's some wonderful people, Americans. It's like just Americans. There's a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, anywhere in the world, even the country's worst enemies. America's the first one to send supplies. But America doesn't do this for the deceased. Who does this? Jews do it. It's just an unbelievable thing. To call us war criminals and people have no idea what we're made of as a people. It's just, so anyway, Rambam here, we'll come to it a little later, ZAKA. So we went through Rambam, and the Mechilta, which is the Midrash on this text that we're learning. So Midrash says, let's go get it. First of all, it's possible, God forbid, a woman or ainli elamaka et ha'ish, maka de isha vidakatan minayin, that it might seem from the way the pasuk is written in the Torah that everything I taught so far tonight and last week is only if they kill a guy, a man. But actually the pasuk says if any party kills any human being. Let me see if I can get the Hebrew, because I don't trust their translations. I don't think any of us does right now. So okay, ish kiyake kol nefesh adam. If someone kills any nefesh adam, any soul of a person, of course Adam is male, but kol would mean any, would include females and children, because an Adam is a grown-up, a man. So kol nefesh adam, these laws apply even if they killed a child or a woman. Bein ish, bein isha, bein katan, ein li el ha'ish hamake isha hamake minayin. Talmud lomar, the Torah says, maka bein isha, bein isha. Okay. Now, here's the extra piece I want to show you for this one, from this Midrashim. Cain, so, okay. So, you're supposed to take him down and bury same day if they killed a grown-up man, woman. Lama ne'amar ish she'achol afilu hika et hanifalim uven shmoni yachayev. Talmud lomar ish ma ish miuchat shu ben kayama yotzu hanafalim uben shmoni shenem ben kayama. So, from the Torah saying anyone who kills a man, and they learn from it, it means even a woman and even a child must be buried same day, but a fetus or a child under 8 does not have to be buried same day. That you might think even if he killed fetuses, nephalim, from the word nofel, to fall. In other words, it didn't get born, it kind of fell out of the womb, which would be that's the way it's in Hebrew. Uven shmona, someone who did not make it old enough. We know from a boy that you wait till the 8th day, because why do we wait till the 8th day? Because there was an understanding there's a greater chance that the kid's going to make it long term if he made it more than 1 week, if he lived past one Shabbos. The Torah explicitly says that a bris is on the 8th day, and it may not be delayed, except for life and death, pikuach nefesh, like some allow if the body, if the kid's yellow, so if his liver hasn't fully developed, so you can wait a little bit longer. Sahevet in Hebrew. But so that's 8 days. But if the child has not yet made it 8 days, the question as to whether he or she is going to make it, not having made it through one complete Shabbos and one complete week. And that's the reason for the 8 days. So we taught something new in that way also. So that, if need be, it can be delayed. It should be respected and shouldn't be delayed. Like, I'll get to it after I finish making my plastic airplane model, but it's not the same as more than a week. Okay, so it's very important, because there's an extra halacha we're going to know. What it's saying is that a person who's ben kayama, who definitely is probably going to live for the long run. Who knows how long anyone's going to live? I mean, look at Gene Hackman, this horrible, horrible story. Who could predict such a thing? Who could predict such a thing? We just pray to God, Al tashlicheni li'et sikna kechlot kocheni. Al tazveni. God, please don't just leave me go when I'm aged and infirm. When I'm infirm, kechlot, when there's no more strength left, but please don't abandon me. So nobody knows how long someone's going to live, and he did make it to 95. Not exactly something to call, but at least something. But still, you don't know how long he's going to live. But if it seems he's going to live for a while longer, and there's no active diagnosis of death on the horizon, so in that case, that person, someone who is that person gets buried immediately, and someone who kills such a person does not get the death penalty. You got that? If he's got a good chance to last a long time, then if he died, you bury him. He wasn't just a 7-day-old, 3-day-old baby, a fetus. On the other hand, if he was murdered, the murderer is just interesting. Let's take a look. Amarava, this is from Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Ches Samid Aleph, Tractate Sanhedrin 78a, folio. Amarava. Rava was one of the great rabbis in Babylonia of the community of, I believe, Neherda. Let me see, Neherda. So it was Rava. That was Rav and Shmuel. Rava was with Abai. I got to stay focused here. Okay. Rava was a great Babylonian Talmudic, one of the most prominent. He and Abaye were famously, constantly, I want to say, arguing with each other. They constantly disagreed with each other in famous halachic disputes. And Rava, imagine this, over an entire Talmud, Rava wins dozens and scores of disputes. Abaye only won 3 disputes in his entire Talmudic history of disputing with Rava. But those are 3 important halachas. Like you might say, why do we even listen to this guy? He's always wrong. First of all, we shouldn't call him a guy. I learned that from my uncle Yaakov. He was teaching me Gemara. I used to go to him every Shabbos to learn Gemara with him. That planted seeds in me to become a rabbi. 14-year-old boy, my father passed away. Uncle Yaakov said, come every Shabbos, Sparrow, let's learn Gemara together. And I ended up wanting to become a rabbi. Go figure. What he did, planted seeds. So I remember I said to Uncle Yaakov something one Shabbos. I said, why is this guy always wrong? Boy, I mean, he didn't get angry because you're such a sweet guy, Uncle Yaakov. He's a guy. But he said, barely, you don't call a guy. He's an Amora. He's a Gadol Hador. He's a Gadol from the generations. You should never speak that way about a person. You call me a guy. So I still do 70 years later. But like, you don't call a rabbi a guy. Call him Rav. And so anyway, Rava. It's important to know that. Like if you're talking about your shul rabbi, I'm sure if you're the kind of person that comes to learn with me every week, I'm sure you're not that like. But there are people who sit in Shabbos lunch and they start talking stories that they were left off at Kiddush, and and then they start talking about the rabbi. And some people are less respectful than other people, and it's not right. It's wrong. When I became an attorney, Ellen and I, during my attorney years, would be invited for Shabbos lunch. We would invite people to our home, and other people would invite us to theirs. I still remember I went one time, and at the Shabbos lunch, we had like 8 people, Ellen and I, the host couple, and 2 other couples. And the conversation at the Shabbos lunch table was knocking rabbis. And these are all Shomer Shabbos Orthodox Jews, just knocking rabbis. And at the beginning, as they got started, the host said something like, Dove, I know you won't mind because now you're a lawyer. I won't mind. It's 40 years later, and I'm bringing it up in my Gemara shiur. Of course I minded. And I didn't mind simply because it's a rabbi. I minded because I'm a Jew. You don't talk about rabbis that way. So anyway, Rava, Hakol modim b'horeg et hatrefa. Now, you know the term trefa. Trefa is non-kosher meat. Literally, it means torn. Torn is treif. When you say food is treif, in class, in just everyday lingo, that means it's not kosher. Are you going to buy this cheese? Looks good. No, the cheese is treif. But cheese can't be treif. It's not torn. What about this? I don't know. What about this? What about these vegetables that have like I don't know, a certain kind of cooked in gravy? And no, it's treif, but it's not treif. But it's treif. The word treif means torn. The reason it became synonymous with non-kosher, particularly non-kosher meat, is that an animal, to be kosher, has to be slaughtered according to very rigid, strict rules of shechita, slaughter. Has to be a certain kind of knife, and only that kind of knife. No other kind of knife. Even if another knife would be more effective, only that knife. Same kind of knife for the last 3,000 years. And it has to be pre-tested, like in the cartoons where they would run a hair, an H-A-I-R, not Bugs Bunny. They would take a hair and run it across the knife to see that it could split a hair in half. It's got to be like that, and it has to have no nicks. And the slaughter has to be a single cut, one way, not like a saw, S-A-W, not like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on the neck. It has to be exactly one cut, and it can't be that the cut pierces by applying pressure, your arm muscles pressing down. It has to be a gentle kind of slicing, but the knife is so sharp, it kills the animal on one slice anyway. The animal doesn't know what happened to it and basically doesn't feel anything. And that's shechita. So if an animal dies instead by being torn, either it's not such a sharp knife and they're going back and forth like a saw, or they're pressing harder, 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 or they shoot it like hunting, or something like bow and arrow. So they're tearing it. So that's treif. That's where the word comes from. So, and actually rabbinic learned people who know halacha refer to nevelis and treifus in the Ashkenazic pronunciation. A rabbi might say something like, that Reform rabbi, he eats nevelis and treifus. So they normally won't just say he eats, like in a shiur, in a higher level Talmud shiur. He wouldn't say, that rabbi eats pork. They'd say they eat nevelis and treifus. Treifus is the Ashkenazic pronunciation of treifot, of torn meat that I just described. And nevela is a carcass, an animal that died on its own from natural causes, whether illness or just from old age, I don't know. But an animal, a cow dies on its own, you're not allowed to eat it. But it was probably not so painful a death as being slaughtered. First of all, I don't know. And second of all, why did it die? It's not so healthy, but bottom line, it's the halacha. Even if the healthiest of all meat are the animals that drop dead or that get shot, which we don't believe. But even if it would be, the halacha is the reason we do things. God said so, end of story. Happens to be God is Rahman, he's Rahman, he's merciful. Okay. Someone who kills a treifa. So that's a reference here to a person who is a victim of murder. Interesting that they use horeg instead of rotzeach. Anyone who kills a treifa, meaning a person who is going to die within 12 months. How do you know? Well, God forbid, sometimes you know. So you don't just guess, but sometimes you know. And sometimes you could be wrong. I don't know what's going to be with the Pope, but I thought he was a garner. I'm reading every day. It's deeper and deeper into his lungs with lung infections, and he can't do this, and it's that. I thought the Pope is gone in a week or two. And it seems to me, if I'm correct, seems like he's bouncing back. Why am I talking about the Pope in my shiur? Because that was the famous case of someone dying. On the other, so you could be wrong and make a halachic ruling. Here's a person who looks like he's dying, but if a person, God forbid, there are certain diseases that the doctor told Denise, my general practice doctor told Denise he's going to die in a week. And that's what got Denise on overdrive, getting me to Cedars. And they told her, I'm going to die in the next 24 hours, that she's got to keep me awake. I can't go to sleep. And they'll try to get me in right away and put me on high flow oxygen or whatever. So that's a treifa. That's someone who the doctor, not a rabbi, a doctor saying this guy is dead any minute now, certainly within the next year. So somebody kills me, gets away with it. At that point, now I'm in a different case. So that's where a guy should hide out. If he's got just hide her out in like a Cedars Sinai or Sheba Hospital and wait for the guy you've always been waiting for. Halacha b'horeged treifa shu pater. You still gonna end up in prison, but you won't be executed. The halacha is hakol modim. Everyone agrees. In other words, what is everyone? It means all rabbis who know the halacha agree that someone who kills someone who's going to die within 12 months, a treifa, exempt from the liability, except in a sense the legal status of the victim. So you're still committed to killing a murder, and therefore you're going to be punished, and God is going to take care of you, but good. God, I don't want to say you. God will take care of that killer, but good, murderer, but doesn't get capital punishment. Big goses. A goses is a person who's going to die any minute. I hope you've never seen that. As a rabbi, I have, and as the husband of a tzaddikus who was in her last, I experienced that. And the goses, that's when you're in the room and they basically tell you it's coming soon, and you hear a different kind of breathing that is particular to a goses. And if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I hope you never have to, but there's a certain kind of a breathing. I won't imitate it. It's just, anyway, a goses, someone who's dying any minute now, and they might last months in that status. Bidei shamayim shuchayev. If you kill someone who is goses, is in the course of soon dying, if he's dying from natural causes, bidei shamayim, at the hands of heaven, let's say from a disease or old age, chayev, then you get executed. For killing someone dying from a natural cause, old age or disease, you do get death penalty. Lo nechlaku el b'goses b'dei adam. The only question is someone who's dying at the hands of another person, someone who basically was murdered, another person, like God forbid in the New York City subways, to throw them on the tracks, where they do whatever they do in the New York subways or in the streets. And you see it in the news that they're bringing him to the hospital, and according to the police, he's in critical condition, and they don't think he's going to make it. Something like that. In the case of someone who, God forbid, is dying not going to make it cause a person, then more madami leila a treifa, or more madami leila gosish b'dei shemayim. Then the debate is he like the one who is a treifa, who's basically already dying, or is he like the one who's been murdered? So I don't want to get into all of that now. We're on the time frame. I want to do this last piece that wraps it together, and then I want to just show you a little bit. Chulin, Gemara Chulin. So they asked the following question, very interesting question. What does all this interesting death have to do with that interesting death? Very interesting question. Joe, well, let's just take the classic root. Let's make it non-Jewish names. Let's make it Sven and Mahmoud. So Sven kills Mahmoud. And Sven is now arrested, and somehow he's Jewish. He converted to Judaism, so he's under Jewish law. So he killed Mahmoud. So does he get the death penalty? There were two witnesses. They warned him according to halacha, everything. All systems go for that once in 7 or 70 years that he should get the death penalty. But he only gets a death penalty if Mahmoud otherwise was okay. But if Mahmoud was dying such that he would die within the next 12 months, then Sven gets himself a good ACLU lawyer who knows the halacha in a halachic environment. Israel has their own ACLU lawyers who race to defend murderers at the first drop of a pin. And the lawyer makes the following argument. Let's think about this. It's Gemara's thinking about it. The lawyer says, my client Mahmoud should not get whoever it was, Mahmoud's son, my client should not get the death penalty for killing the other guy because we contend the other guy would have died within 12 months. And then the other side brings witnesses that is perfectly healthy, is perfectly healthy, and then they demand an autopsy. Why don't we require an autopsy on every murder victim? Halakhically, we talked in the past about California law, American law. Why are we not required under halacha to do an autopsy on every murder victim under the concept of pikuach nefesh? That life is at stake, right? You're allowed to eat on Yom Kippur, pikuach nefesh. If someone's going to die if they don't eat on Yom Kippur, if the mother is in labor on Shabbos, you drive her to the hospital, even though it's Shabbos, pikuach nefesh, life. So the murderer's life is at stake. The murderer is going to be executed unless we can find that the murderee, that the one he just killed, was dying. And pikuach nefesh, in order to save a life, you should have to do an autopsy. So the Gemara asks, why don't we make it a halacha? And this the Gemara answers. See for yourself if you can guess. Rav Kahana is a different Rabbi Kahana. Rav Kahana Amar, Rav Kahana, famous Talmudic Amora says, Asi mehoreg is a nefesh to Amar Rachmana, Katle v'leichush dumat, that the Torah says you're supposed to kill the one who murders, the leichush dilma treifa hava, and shouldn't we be concerned? Maybe the one who got killed would have been dying in the next 12 months anyway. Elalav. No, we don't concern ourselves with that and require an autopsy. Mishum da amrinan zil bat aruba. We follow the majority. The majority of people who get murdered are not 12 months away from dying naturally. Consequently, we do not require, we follow the majority. Rav Kahana said, let us be concerned perhaps the person that he killed was a treifa, one who has a wound or condition will lead to his death in 12 months. Well, we just learned one who kills a treifa is exempt from capital punishment because not since the halachic status of the treifa is that he's already a dead person. The person that was killed, I failed maybe to spell that out, that if a person's dying in the next month, from interstitial lung disease, my favorite. So he's dead. He's considered already dead. So how can you kill a dead person? That's why if he's a treifa, there's no, rather, it's the person we're concerned for this, not due to the fact that we say follow the majority of people who are not treifa. So that's therefore why we don't do autopsies. To wrap it up, our class is over. For time purposes, our class is over. I have 2 clips. One clip is 2 minutes, so that's nothing. And the other is 7. I'll show about 3-4 minutes of it. This is so pertinent. Here we go. Eyewitness account. Tragic aftermath. The ZAKA volunteer's testimony.
We saw was a couple, father and mother, sitting there on the knees on the floor. They were on the knees. Now they were head down, hands tied to the back. On the other side of the dining room, was in the living dining room, or whatever, was 7-year-old boy and a girl, I would say about 6 years old, sitting just against the parents, hands tied to the back, same position. The bodies were tortured. While now, start to use imagination. Who was tortured before? Who saw if this was on purpose? If this was the children looking at the parents being tortured, the parents seen, and when I say tortured, I will say missing body pieces. An eye, just taken out an eye, one eye, fingers being, and all this happened, and by the end, they all had a bullet, and still not finished. In the middle, there's a table.
All right, we'll skip some of this.
And for this family, they just took it. They were hungry, and they took it and they ate this meal while torturing these children.
They opened the refrigerator and grabbed food while they were doing it. And here's the other one. This is not as hard to watch, but this gives you the other side of ZAKA. Let's get this going here. Come on.
We saw.
Okay, let's just get it moving. Oh, I see why it's not going. Okay, hold on. I do it differently in my Sunday class, so here, this will do it.
אני אלחם עם עצמי אם אני באמת מספיק חזק או לא. הרבה מתנדבים לא מסוגלים. אנשים מבחוץ שיראו אותי, אולי באירוע יחשבו שאני רובוט, שאני גיבור. בתוך הלב אני בטוח שהכל יהיה לי פרפרים כאלה בבטן, ואני אתלבט עם עצמי, אני אלחם עם עצמי אם אני באמת מספיק חזק או לא. הרבה מתנדבים לא מסוגלים לעשות את זה. אני מאוד רגיש, אני יכול לבכות מכל דבר, ואני... קשה לי גם... אפשר להגיד שזקה זה חברת ניקיון. כשאנחנו מגיעים לתאונת דרכים, בסך הכל מה אנחנו עושים שם? אנחנו נעשה את הכל כדי שכל החלקים, כל הדברים יבואו לקבורה. אנחנו מאמינים בקבורה.
And again, this will be 7 minutes if you stay for the whole thing. You don't have to want to offer it.
כשהייתי ילד קטן, אני זוכר, אני הייתי גר ברחוב שמואל הנביא בירושלים, היה לנו שם פיגוע מאוד קשה, פיגוע של קו 2, מחבל שהתפוצץ, היו שם מלא הרוגים, זה היה ממש ליד הבית שלנו, עמדתי במופסת, ראיתי את האמבולנסים והמתנדבים של זקה, שבפיגוע הזה הגיעו ממש ראשונים, ואמרתי לעצמי, לא הבנתי מה הפיגוע הזה, הבנתי רק דבר אחד, שמגיעים אנשים טובים ועושים משהו טוב, אמרתי, כשאני אהיה גדול, גם אני אהיה שם, גם אני אעשה את זה. ואני גם אציל חיים, ואנחנו גם מכבדים את מה שנשאר רק לכבד. פינו משם? באיזה מצב? אז אני הולך לשם לנקות את הממצאים? את כל הדם, את כל הדברים, לכבד? אני קרוב, כן. עכשיו אנחנו נוסעים לאשקלון. שם יש תאונת עבודה כנראה, בן 60 שנמחץ מתחת לקונטיינר. כל הגוף שלי בלגן, חבל על הזמן. אני מקבל הרבה אנרגיות. בכל אירוע שיש, למרות שאני כבר כמה שנים, כל אירוע, כל יום זה כמו האירוע הראשון שלי. אבל דווקא הם הצליחו. אוקיי, אנחנו נוסיף את החול הזה. המשטרה שהגיעו למקום פשוט עשו חקירה כדי לדעת שלא היה רשלנות, שלא היה מישהו שעשה משהו מסוכן. הם עושים חקירות, הם ממשיכים, אנחנו לא עושים את החקירה, אנחנו בסך הכל באים, אנחנו מבינים את הסיטואציה הקשה, אנחנו מטפלים בלי לשאול סתם שאלות. וואי, אני רועד. בכל אופן, אנחנו פה באשקלון, אני סיימנו את האירוע, אנחנו ממצאים, גם קצת ממצאים שהרופאים במקום השאירו. וזהו, נגמר האירוע. האירוע מאוד קשה, הגיעו לפה בני משפחה. בכל אופן, אנחנו חיזקנו אותם, דיברנו פה... אירוע קשה.
שומע אותי?
כן, שומע.
אני רוצה שתעצור בצד, כנס תחנת דלק, תקנה בקבוק מים, תירגע, אני לא מאשר לך להמשיך בנהיגה עכשיו, קיבלת?
כן, קיבלתי, אני תכף אחפש תחנת דלק, אני אכנס לשם, אני אשתה משהו, 100%. אחרי האירוע, תמיד אנחנו נדבר בין המתנדבים מה עברנו.
לייזר יחסית די צעיר בזק"א, היה לו שבוע מאוד קשה. שבוע מאוד קשה, אפשר לראות עליו שהוא אחרי איזה טראומה.
השבוע יצאתי למספר אירועים בארץ. כמה אירועים אני יכול להגיד שממש השפיעו עליי, כי התמודדתי השבוע ממש עם כמה משפחות. עוד משהו קטן, שאני היום בבוקר, הייתי באתיופיה לפני כמה חודשים עם ZAKA במשלחת. היה לנו משימה מאוד קשה. הגענו למקום ש-157 אנשים התרסקו ביחד עם מטוס, ונשארו 157 משפחות דואגות, בוכות. אני קבעתי עם המשפחה שאני רוצה להיפגש איתם, כי האירוע הזה לא עזב אותי, האירוע הזה לא עזב אף אחד מאיתנו. עכשיו אנחנו בדרך לזיכרון יעקב. שם אנחנו הולכים לפגוש שם בני משפחה ממשפחת ראם, מהאסון באתיופיה, שם אחד מהמשפחה נהרג. אני יודע שהם מתמודדים מאוד קשה, זה לא עובר מהסדר יום שלהם. הייתי במקום, הרגשתי את האסון לפני ואחרי. אני מרגיש צורך להגיע לדבר איתם, לשמוע איך הם מרגישים היום, אולי לחזק אותם.
כמה אנשים נפלאים ליוו אותנו מהיום הראשון, עשו הכל, 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 מה שהם יכלו ומה שהם לא יכלו. אם נסגר חלון, אם אחד דלת, אם לא פה אז שם, אם זה לא האיש הזה אז האיש אחר, הכל, 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 ועשה להחזיר אותך הביתה.
אני ועזריאל, המפקד שלנו מזק"א שהיה במשלחת, אנחנו נכנסים שם, ומשה אומר לנו, אנחנו מחר נכנסים לשטח. אני ועזריאל התחלנו לרקוד במסדרון של המלון. אנחנו רוקדים שם, כל הסינים, כל היום עוברים. הם לא מבינים איפה אנחנו רוקדים, איפה אנחנו הולכים להיכנס. אנחנו הולכים להיכנס למקום קשה, אסון והכל. ולמה אנחנו רוקדים? כי אנחנו הולכים לעזור לאנשים.
אני תמיד ידעתי על ZAKA מהתקשורת. אבל כשנפגשתי בכם שם פנים מול פנים, וראיתי את העשייה הזאת שלכם, אמרתי פשוט, אלוהים,
מלאכים.
שולח לנו מלאכים בדמות אדם, רק חסרים הכנפיים.
אתם יחידת העילית של ZAKA, כל פעם שאנחנו יושבים, מתכנסים, אני שומע את הסיפורים, כל פעם אני מצטמרר מחדש, אני יודע את הסיפורים האלה, אתם לא יכולים לספר בבית, וזה חשוב לשבת, להוציא, לספר.
אחד מהדברים הכי חשובים בזק"א, מבחינת חוסן נפשי של מתנדב, כדי שהוא יישאר שפוי, זה לדבר.
פני השם.
במוזיקה אפשר לפרוק הרבה רגשות, בפרט כששרים ביחד משהו, עוצמים עיניים ושרים, זה אחד הדברים הכי מרגשים שיכולים לקרות לבן אדם. זק"א בשבילי זה חיים, זה סיפוק. נכון שכואב לי שהיו דברים קשים, אבל כשאני עוצם את העיניים, כשאני הולך לישון, אני בן אדם אחר, אני הולך לישון עם חיוך, אני אומר, היום עשיתי משהו טוב לעם ישראל, עשיתי טוב לעולם. גם אם זה, אנחנו מטפלים בכולם, אם זה יהודים, גויים, נוצרים, ערבים, מוסלמים, לא משנה במי, אנחנו מטפלים בכולם, וזה מה שמאוד יפה בזה. וזה באמת מה שנותן סיפוק.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here and learning with me. Next week, we're going to go on to a new subunit, and I hope you found these last 3 weeks not just like a boring subject of autopsies, but I hope it's really enriched you with how much is really pertinent to our lives as Jews, and particularly in wartime. Have a wonderful evening, Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see many of you, God willing, on Sunday. Bye-bye.